Up on page 54, the first full paragraph.
Actually, 54? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm on 53. We found two.
That we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiments, things, money, ourselves? And then with a bitter motive, have we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing. We saw that at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith, or love, or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason? That wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it is. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we could. The electrons themselves seem to be more intelligent than that, at least so the chemist said. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything.
Reason is what Bill's talking about is I can give you good reason why you're wrong. Your theory isn't right, and that's what we're talking about here.
Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us used it, entirely dependable, though it emanated from our best minds. And what about people who proved that man could never fly?
Or the bumblebee.
Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world, people who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true.
Now, here we go. You're about to tell us where this God is that we seek. He's not out here. Where is he, Charlie?
Actually, we're fooling ourselves because for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God.
So the moment that you fell out of your mama's womb, you've been seeking something, and we've sought it in men, women, homes, motorcycles, cars, better jobs, higher education. And we have the fundamental idea of God right from the gate.
Now, it may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, or worship of other things, but in some form or another it was there. For faith in the power greater than ourselves, and in miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives, are fact as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feelings we have for a friend. Now, sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was just as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality, or the power, deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there where he may be found. It was so with us. We can only clear the ground a bit. But if our testimony helps sweep away any prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish,
that's step 3. If you wish,
you can join us on this broad highway.
And here's that word attitude. With this attitude, you cannot fail. There's a promise. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you.
Let's jump over to the last page,
page 57.
The next to the last paragraph in the middle. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us.
So I'm going to make a strong suggestion to you. I've heard this so many times. You'll hear a new person come up to a prospective sponsor and say, tell me what I need to do, and they'll say, go home and read how it works and call me tomorrow. Please don't do that, because you've left out everything from the blank page up to page 58. Where's step 1 and 2? How it works begins with step 3. Step 1 is a conclusion of the mind. You're sitting on the couch, hadn't moved. Step 2 is a strong suspicion and a conclusion of the mind. They're not working steps. And we have just taken steps 1 and steps 2. Do y'all have any questions so far? How it works, chapter 5. And today Charlie's going to read the original manuscript before it was edited down to the version you have in your book. So we invite you to follow along and notice the subtle differences. Step 1 is a conclusion of the mind. It's an observation and a conclusion of the mind. Step 2 is a strong suspicion and a conclusion of the mind. They're not working steps. You haven't written anything down, and we're going to cover that writing thing here in a little bit. But right now, for the purposes of where we're at, they're observations, conclusions of the mind. And again, Charlie's going to read from the original manuscript, and in your book, just kind of follow along and notice the subtle differences. And I have an opinion, and my opinion is I wish they'd have left it alone. I love the original manuscript. I'm hardcore. I don't believe in pussyfooting around.
Now, Bill Wilson's also asked one time and said, well, that chapter 5 is kind of vague. He says, how does it work? What do you mean, Bill? Well, how does what work? And he says, it's how step 1 and 2 work. It's a review of step 1 and 2 and an outline of the remaining steps. So, in step 5, we have a little review and an outline of a program of action, and we're going to read some of it.
When I first got here, there was an older woman, and she was asked to read how it works at one of our early meetings, and she said, thoroughly have we seen a person fail who has rarely followed our path. And I love that.
Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. It's usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves.
By the way, they're going to use the word honest 3 times in this one paragraph.
Because there are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a way of life which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you have decided you want what we have...
Step 3, if you have decided, step 3 proposition.
And you are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to follow directions.
Come on.
At some of these you may balk. You may think you can find an easier and softer way. We doubt if you can. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Now, some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the results was nil until we let go. Absolutely. Remember that you are dealing with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for you. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. You must find him now. Half measures will avail you nothing. You stand at the turning point. Throw yourself under his protection and care with complete abandon. Mm-hmm. Now we think you can take it. Here are the steps we took which are suggested as your program of recovery. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care and direction of God as we understood Him. Step 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6. We're entirely willing that God remove all these defects of character.
I love this next one.
Step 7. Humbly, on our knees, ask Him to remove our shortcomings, holding back nothing. Step 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make complete amends to them all. And step 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And in step 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And finally, step 12. Having had a spiritual experience as a result of this course of action, we tried to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now, you may exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after have been designed to sell you 3 pertinent ideas. A, that you are alcoholic and cannot manage your own life. B, that probably no human power can relieve your alcoholism. C, that God can and will. If you're not convinced on these vital issues, you ought to reread this book up to this point, or else throw it away.
Yeah. Was that unclear at all? It's not too vague, is it? Can you go to the mic? The button.
Hello?
Hey, how are you?
You know where it says in step 7 where you humbly ask God for your shortcomings. Have you seen anyone that refused to be humble and that was able to be successful in this program?
I don't know that I can answer that. My experience when, you don't have to turn it back off, it doesn't matter. My experience when people get to the point of asking for help, really wanting help, they don't get to step 7 if they haven't been qualified. I mean, the book tells us that back over in chapter 7, when we get there, we have to qualify these people as sponsors. And, I can carry the message. I can't deliver it to you. And if you want it, I've got it. But I'm not here to convince you that you're alcoholic. If you've not been beaten into a state of reasonableness, there's nothing I can do to further confirm that for you. Make sense? Yeah. So by the time you get to step 7, you've been qualified and you're ready to rip and run. We talked about the book is going to give us clear-cut directions on the time frame with which we do the steps. I mentioned last night that I've got a friend that's pushing up grass today. His sponsor had him on a step a year. And I want what our co-founders got, what our first 100 got and what they had. And in order to do that, I'm convinced with my life that if I do what they did, I'll get what they got. So the very next thing the book says, in squiggly writing, it says, being convinced. We were at step 3. Being convinced of what?
Step 1, step 2.
Step 1 and step 2, because that's all we've covered. Are you convinced that you're alcoholic and your life is unmanageable? Well, yeah. Didn't you see I just got off the short bus? Am I convinced that God can restore me to sanity? Well, yeah. And I've had guys say, I'm not crazy. I'll go, really? You want to talk about that? So we're being convinced we are at step 3. It doesn't say we take it. Guys, take these words literally. I was talking with someone on the break earlier. When I sat there and I looked at those steps up on the wall, here's what I read. We turned our will and our lives over to the care of God. It's not what the step says, does it? It says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, which is that we decided to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? I'm going to give you a visual real quick. Let's say, for instance, I got on my hands and knees right now, and I needed to go straight to Robin. I couldn't go around the end of these tables. Robin's sitting at the registration table in the back. Okay, you with me? Just follow along. And I needed to make a straight line to her. In order to get her to her on my hands and knees, I've got to do a couple of things. I got to take some action. I can probably crawl under these tables, but there's chairs and pocketbooks and everything else in the way. I'm going to have to move these objects out of the way that are in my path to Robin. You follow? So I've got to clear some stuff away in order to get to her. Now, I can tell Charlie right now, say, Charlie, I made a decision. I'm going to get on my hands and knees and crawl over to Robin. Charlie's going to say, well, partner, you're going to probably have to move some stuff out of the way. Steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. You follow? So I've made a decision that I want to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, because for the last friggin' 60 pages, y'all have convinced me that my way hadn't worked. I got some broken thinking going on here. So in order to get my life aligned with His, I've got to do some stuff. So it says the first requirement is that we be convinced that life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Step 3 is that we turn our will, life. Your will is your thoughts and wants. Your life is your actions. So I'm going to turn my thoughts, my wants, and my actions over to God. But I got to do some stuff in order to do that.
And the first direction.
Hang on.
Okay.
There's 2 wills. There's God's will and there's man's will. And for this purpose, we're going to call God's will perfect. And man's will we're going to call flawed. Okay? So my will hasn't worked up to this point. My efforts every day are to align my will with God's as best I can. I'm never going to be perfect. I already know that. And my actions, all actions, are born in thought. Very rarely do we do anything by knee-jerk. We use that as a cliche term. An example, you've seen me drink a case of this water. I have extreme dry mouth, and my mouth will become dry. It'll start burning, and it doesn't feel very good. And I think my mouth is dry and it's on fire. and I reach over and I take the action of picking up the bottle and I set it down. But that action is born here. It's born in thought. Am I making sense? Two wills, God's will, my will. Man is the only critter on the planet Earth that God gave the power of choice and free will to. All the rest of them, butterflies, cows, dogs, horses, all of these other animals, are all God-directed. I got two little Boston Terriers at home, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, and they're sitting around the house right now. I'm telling you, and they are a kick. But I can guarantee you, I will bet my life on it, that Willie is not sitting at home wondering what it'd be like to hit that poodle down the street. He ain't. All he cares about is a tennis ball and a milk bone. That's all he cares about. He's not worried about the stock market. Doesn't care. Because he's God-directed. And when it's his time to go and recreate, God's little recreation clock will go off and he'll know. He's God-directed. And as we're going to learn as we go through this work, we get all tripped up in that sex arena and that money arena, that security deal. And it ain't got to be just alcoholics. It happens to the cats at Enron and Tiger Woods and Brett Favre and all them cats. Don't think they're alcoholic, but they go dipping their wick in something that don't belong to them. You see what I'm saying? I was watching a nature special on the History Channel or one of those channels, late night surfing the television, and the thing started off with a still small pool of water, a mirrored pool up in the mountain there, and all of a sudden the camera dipped below the surface and there were these salmon in there swimming around, these grown salmon, and the female started spitting out little baby salmon, and they would unfold and they're swimming around, doing what salmon do, and it's a winter thaw. And all of a sudden, this little still small pool and the snow and all is spilling down the side of this mountain over these rocks and stuff and into the ocean. Well, these little fish get into that stream and they get down to the ocean and they scatter. They don't stay in a school, and they swim out for thousands of miles and they do salmon stuff. And then all of a sudden, that little God clock goes off, ding, 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 and they turn their little salmon butts around because it's time to go back and recreate. They don't have a GPS and they don't have Lorentz. They got that God thing. And they're thousands of miles out in the ocean, and they turn around and they swim back to the very mouth of that creek from where they were born. Well, it's a winter thaw. And the water's coming down the side of that mountain with ferocity. And the bears have just woke up and they're hanging out on the rocks and they're hungry. And these grown salmon, they hit the mouth of this creek and they start skyrocketing up over these rocks. And some of them will hit the rocks and they'll die. There's a great attrition in this process. And every now and then in midair, a bear might snag one and have lunch. But there's a certain percentage of those fish that make it back to that still small pool where they were born because they're on a mission from God. They go there, they mate, they reproduce, and then they turn over and they die. And the cycle continues. That's God-directed. That's not the way man is. Two wills, God's will and man's will. Man's will is flawed.
So what we're trying to do in this process is try to align our will, which is flawed. We're trying to turn into God-directed consciousness. In other words, you're not running the show, Charlie. Yes, there's action you're going to take. Yes, sure. But all the decisions are not yours because your decision-making is flawed. You follow the dictates of the God of your understanding while you're doing this, and it's going to turn out all right. And that's exactly what we're trying to convey, that the writings are telling us. It's not Charlie done this. My sobriety is not what I did. My sobriety is based on the grace of God and doing the best I can to follow His directions. And when I don't know His directions, I ask somebody about it. is this my thinking, or is this really the way I ought to be going? And the people in sobriety will say, well, this is what I did, and I got good results from it. So, Bill's going to give us some requirements or directions for taking step 3.
I want to go back and say something about the original manuscript. When that thing was sent out to different factions of society, where it was medical, legal, whatever the case may be, came back with some critiques, and it ended up in your book the way that it was finally approved. One copy that had a great influence on the final outcome of the writing was a guy named Dr. Howard, and he lived in Montclair, New Jersey, which is where Hank Parkhurst was from. And he looked at it, he's non-alcoholic, and he said, guys, he said, I think you ought to change that, the you that you've got in there to we or us. And he says, I think you ought to take the word must and turn it into ought. And he said, you ought to take the word directions out and use suggestions. It kind of pissed Bill off. He says, I'll take your suggestions. He said, but either y'all leave me the hell alone or you write the book yourself. And I said, oh, easy, Bill. It's okay. So he took those words out and he changed them for a page and a half. And then he put them right back in. Bill's pretty hard-headed.
Okay, here's some directions for taking step 3. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So I have to ask myself, am I convinced of that? That all my logical thinking that I thought was logical and all my self-will has got me to this point in my life. On the basis that we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Now, most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person's like the actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, that's the selfishness. If only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Now, everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. Now, on the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest.
Sounds kind of like a passive-aggressive cat, doesn't it?
But as most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. Now, what usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself some more. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be.
And what we're talking about is different forms of manipulation, demanding or gracious.
Still, the play doesn't suit him. Admitting he may have somewhat faults, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, and self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well?
Delusion is insanity.
Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? So our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. And the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity? selfishness, self-centeredness. That, we think, is the root of our trouble.
This whole paragraph should be highlighted, guys, because we're driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, and we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. And boy, we don't like that. What they're just saying, you got a part in this deal, Larry.
And Bill, for the first time, is actually pointing out some of our defects of character. So our trouble, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness.
You see, he put the word must right back in there.
We must, or it kills us. And God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without His aid. Many of us have had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness, much by wishing or trying on our own willpower. We had to have God's help. Now, this is the how and why of it. First, we had to quit playing God.
Set aside that self-will. It didn't work. And then it says, next we decided. There's your third step decision right there. We decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, and we are His agents. He is the Father, and we are His children. He gives us 3 different examples, and we all hook up with at least one of those. We're all children. That's an easy one. The principal is like Magic Johnson. He has an agent, and that agent cuts the good deals for him. And God is my agent. I'm just a principal. I'm here to play the role He assigns.
Now, most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom.
All right, we're going back to the arch chart. There's your step 1. There's step 2. If you build this structure and you don't put a keystone at the top, this thing is going to collapse on itself. So this is the most important stone in this structure if you're going to build it upwards. So there's your keystone, your step 3 decision. We just made an invitation for God to enter in.
Now, when we sincerely took such a position...
Now, what Charlie is reading, there's 2 or 3 times in this book where they will read a set of promises that you will get as a byproduct of doing the work. And these are step 3 promises, and we haven't taken it yet. But here's what you can expect.
We had a new employer. Being all-powerful, He provided what we needed if we kept close to Him and performed His work well.
There's a caveat there.
Now, established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of His presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn.
That's a big promise. Guys, we are at step 3 decision. There's going to be a couple of things. We've been doing this for a long time. And there was one point to where we would go around the room, each person individually on their knees would take the 3rd step prayer. And then the groups got bigger and bigger. And a couple of years ago, we were in Akron, and you've heard me refer to Ray Grumney, the archivist for Dr. Bob's house. And Ray's got about 150 years sober, and he's about 150 years old. And in talking with Ray and getting to know him over the years, he shared with us that he and some of the other archivists and board of directors up there had retraced and researched Dr. Bob Smith greatly, and they came to the conclusion that when they were taking these drunks up to the upstairs portion of the house into Sue's room, Dr. Bob's daughter, adopted daughter, they would get them on their knees and they would do a thing called the surrender. And Ray shared what they consider to be a pretty accurate format for that surrender. And we're going to do that with you today. And there ain't no scorekeeping. I'll just share my experience. And my experience is I pray on my knees. And I'm going to pray on my knees as long as my Creator will allow me to get down there and do it. But before we do that, I want to break down this prayer, because this prayer in this book is written in King James, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not taking a criticism of it. I just don't talk in King James. If I come to you on one of the breaks and say, "How art thou?" slap me, because I've taken leave of my senses. I talk to my Creator just like I talk to you. So let's take this prayer and put it in plain English so that we understand it a little better before we do this. Before we do this. And the other thing too, guys, if you don't want to take step 3, if you don't want to do it, that's cool. There's no scorekeeping, but I take it every time that we do these book studies. The book says we were now at step 3. Doesn't say we take it. We're there. It says we're at it. And it says, many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, in squiggly writing, God, I offer myself to you, to build with me and do with me as you see fit. Relieve me of the bondage of self. When I think about the word bondage, I think of handcuffs. It's a very familiar apparatus. Or bars. I've been behind bars. I've been in bondage. But in this particular case, they're talking about I've been in bondage at my own hand. My actions and my thoughts and the things that I've done in my life have put me in bondage at my own hand. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. We agreed a few minutes ago, God's will is perfect and my will is flawed. Take away my difficulties. Difficulties with what? How about writing a 4th step? How about maybe sitting down with a new person and sharing all this stuff? How about making that 8-step list? How about going out and actually making amends to those people, places, and institutions that we've harmed? How about life? Take the 12-step program off the table. We've got a brand new way of life, and we don't know how to do that. We've been career criminals. I've heard a lot of God's kids in my life. How do I live this new spiritual walk? Take away my difficulties with that, maybe? Take away my difficulties in living in that home with those people that only know me as an alcoholic. Take away my difficulties. Why? That victory over them will bear witness to those cats that are coming up behind me, those sponsees. Bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. May I do your will always. There's no amen, because we're making a beginning here. I asked a couple of guys that I sponsor back home. We were talking about sponsorship and how they make their decisions on who's going to be their guide. Independent of each other, they both said to me, we have watched you, because I'm self-employed. And there are many times where I can't make the payroll. I can't keep my lights on. And I'm not looking for self-pity. It's just a fact of life. If you're living in this country, in this economy, and you're self-employed, you know my world. And they said, we've watched you walk through some difficult times. I lost my brother, the man that gave me you. They've seen me go through divorce and bankruptcy and all these things, and they said, we chose you to be a sponsor because you have taught us how you can get through these difficult spots with dignity. And I ain't trying to be a hero here. I'm just saying, man, you know, when I trust and rely, man. I trust and rely. And it ain't always easy. But they're watching me. I've got great chin music, man. I can preach a good game, but watch the way I walk. Just watch the way this man walks. Watch the way my friend Kip and Sam walk. I mean, that's what these young kids are looking for. These new people that are walking in here. It's not how to just get through. How do I really live? Remember in Bill's story, he says, the joy of living we really have. Not that we fantasize about or we hope for. The joy of living we really have right here, right now, right between these, right there, right now. And then Bill gives us a little caveat. He says, we thought well before taking this step. And now you've already gotten up off your knees, right? And we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon, remember, your bailing water or putting on a life preserver, ourselves utterly to him. I'm going to get on my knees, and I'm going to ask a series of questions, and you guys pray standing up, laying down, sitting in your chair, it don't matter. But I'm going to ask these questions, and they're all yes or no answers. Everybody ready? Have you learned and fully conceded to your own innermost self that you're an alcoholic?
Yeah.
Do you believe that you're even willing to believe that there is a power greater than yourself?
Yes.
Are you convinced about steps 1 and 2?
Yes.
Are you convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success?
Yes.
Are you convinced that your troubles are basically of your own making, and that they arise out of you, and that you're an extreme example of self-will run riot?
Yes.
Are you convinced that you must be rid of this selfishness?
Yes.
Are you convinced that your selfishness is killing you?
Yes.
Are you convinced that there is often no way of entirely getting rid of self without a higher power's aid?
Yes.
Are you convinced that you have to have a higher power's help?
Yes.
Are you convinced that you have to quit playing the role of a higher power, that it never worked?
Yes.
Are you convinced that a higher power is going to be your director, principal, father, and employer?
Yes.
Are you convinced that you have thought well about taking this step?
Yes.
Are you convinced that you can at last abandon yourself utterly to a higher power?
Yes.
Are you ready to take step 3?
Yes.
Altogether, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Bottom of page 63. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action.
Guys, I'm going to go back to that thing we talked about a while ago. There's a clear-cut timeline in this book when to do the work. What is that direction? You just got off your knees. What does it say? Next. And it says vigorous. Vigorous means what? Forceful and energetic. Next, we launched. If you've ever watched the space shuttle take off from down in Florida, it's not fooling around when they hit the on switch. That thing's belching gas and fire out the ass end of it. So we suggest you get off your knees and get a little fire and smoke belching out your butt, and let's go. Next.
The first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us.
So we can quibble over the time frame. Somewhere between next and at once is when you want to get your 4-step going.
Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods and to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. Your first directions for step 4. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Now, being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations.
And we're going to talk about resentment. If you look this word up, R-E means to do something again. Zent comes from the Latin word centuri, which means to feel. So we re-feel. I love what Joe McQuaney said. I've got a set of DVDs he did before he crossed over, and they're called The Steps We Took. And he does this little tongue-in-cheek thing. He said, resentments are laughable once you get them out of your mind and onto paper. I wrote some stuff down that happened to me when I was in grade school. And I laughed my ass off when I got out of my head and on paper. I said, really, Larry, you have been toting this around this long? You're kidding me, right? And from the time it happened, this little tiny kid thing happened in grade school to the time I wrote them down at 40, I carried them around. Now, the incident, that event, when it happened in a little boy's room in elementary school. These two guys took a shot at me, and when they walked out of that bathroom, they forgot it even happened before they got back to class. You follow? I carried it for 40 friggin' years. I let that thing stay in my head. I allowed it to scar me. So I refelt it, and it's like an instant replay machine. We've got them up here. But the difference with us, if you go back and you watch Joe Theismann back in the days with the Redskins, and Lawrence Taylor breaks through the line and hits him in his lower leg, and the leg snaps, if they replay that again today, that leg and Lawrence Taylor is going to replay exactly the same. Back then they'd say, my God, Jim, let's see that again. And all of a sudden you'd get back up, the leg would go back together, and he'd go back like this in the pocket, and LT would come through and hit him, and, oh my God, Jim, did you see that? Well, see, with us, when we replay it, it gets more sensationalized. It doesn't even resemble what really happened. These cats forget about it in 2 minutes on their way back to class, and I'm toting this crap around like luggage. So resentment is the number one offender, to re-feel what really happened. Not what I imagined or what I fantasized or sensationalized it to be.
The whole thing that we're looking at in this fourth step of the resentments, resentments are reliving the past. I spent 90% of my life waiting for my past to change. And it never did. So we got pencil in hand, we got a sheet of paper in front of us, and we're going to start on this fourth step. We're not doing it alone. There's a lot of prayers that we're going to have to talk with our Creator about, to have the courage to go through this. But Bill's going to give us some clear-cut directions on how to take step 4.
And the first 2 lines in this paragraph are promises as well. Resentment's the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Promise.
From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick.
Here's one of the most beautiful promises in the book.
When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically.
The obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body are gone.
When it talks about insanity, our book talks about we're strangely insane. Strange insanity is not a mental problem. It is a spiritual problem. So once the spiritual malady is overcome, then we straighten out mentally and physically. We all got some walking around sins. I'd venture to say everybody in this room has their right shoe on their right foot and their left shoe on their left foot. I would venture to say that everybody in this room knows it's not nice to pick your nose and flick your boogers on each other.
Hey!
So, we have some walking around sins. So, that is just common, but when I'm in my cup, all sorts of things are distorted. All sorts of things. I'll drool on myself. I'll lose bladder control. I'll do all sorts of strange things because when I'm drunk, God is not in the picture. Alcohol is my master. And that's what they're trying for me to do, to get reconnected with my God. We have been spiritually sick. In dealing with the resentments, we set them on paper. So here's some action, Charlie. You need a pencil, and you need a piece of paper.
Guys, all these sheets are going to be in your packet. And as we said yesterday when we began this thing, we're going to give you an idea of what was laid out to us by Joe and Charlie. These are their forms, they're not ours. Everything in that packet can be reconciled in this book. And we're not here to tell you that it's our way. We're not rewriting the program. If you're working a 300-page California 4-step, God bless you. You know, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm on board with some of my heroes that say one of the best 4-steps I've ever seen was on the back of a Waffle House napkin. This is merely what I do with my guys. This is what I have done forever. As a matter of fact, my sponsor and I take a different approach on the 4th step, but it's okay. We all end up at the same place. It doesn't matter the approach. And what we're sharing with you is the approach that we took that works for us. And these sheets are in your packet. And for me and my guys, it breaks it down really simple. And this might astound some of you, but they'll get this 4-step pack on Monday, and we're doing a 5th step on Tuesday. I mean, this is not a damn month-long process. This is the easiest thing in the world, and you're talking about your favorite thing, you. Okay?
In dealing with the resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry.
And that's in this first column here. And you're going top to bottom. It doesn't say that you go one and then why. You go top to bottom. What top to bottom, sheet after sheet after sheet, top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom.
After that column is completed, we ask ourselves why we were angry.
Column 2, and you go top to bottom. And here's the thinking behind that. I know that on your sheets you've got these instructions, but we also know you're good alcoholics and you're not going to read them. And there's somebody in this room, you'll go blam, blam, blam. And what happens, for me, my first 4th step that I did on this sheet was on her. And boy, I was pissed off at her. I mean, it took sheets on her. And by the time I got to about the 3rd column, right about here, I was blocked. I was thirsty. I wanted to kill that bitch. So it's top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom. And you're only going to have one sheet on resentments. And if you've only got 7 resentments, you may be in the wrong place this weekend. I mean, if you're a real alcoholic. Okay, go ahead, Charlie.
Column 2, we ask ourselves why we were angry. Or in other words, why is this entry on my list? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened.
And this is the 3rd column. So let me back up just a second, Charlie. Bear with me just a minute. Mm-hmm. These are the basic instincts of life. This thing is kind of out of whack. There's 3 instincts of life. Every aspect of your life is included in one of these basic instincts. It's either social, because we're herding animals. We like to do book studies in groups. We like to go to meetings in groups. We like to go to football games with people. We're herding animals. And in that instinct is self-esteem. How do I feel about myself? Well, if I'm not feeling good about me, that second one is going to be affected, my personal relationships. If I'm not thinking good about myself or feeling good about myself, I'm convinced that you're not feeling too good about me. So my personal relationships, real or or fantasy, are my reality. And then, what are my ambitions? If I'm not feeling good about me, and I'm sure you don't feel good about me, what am I going to do to change that? Can I go buy you something to make you like me? Or if I'm not feeling good about myself, perhaps I can go to the Harley store and buy a piece of chrome. Because next time, I'm feeling pretty good about that chrome, Charlie. And the next time I see you, you're going to say, Charlie, Larry, that's a good-looking piece of chrome.
I like your chrome.
See? And I've won him over. What am I willing to do to feel better about me, fancy it or real? And what am I willing to do to win your favor? That's your ambitions. Then you got the security instinct. We all got to have clothing, and we got to have a little money to buy food and pay rent and all these different things. That's the material thing. And then you've got that emotional. Well, if column one's out of whack, that emotional deal is going to be out of whack too. But let's just say I'm out of whack with the material thing. I'm not doing too hot. I'm in the soup line. And I don't want to eat in the soup line. I want to buy a Big Mac every now and then. Get into that ambitions. What am I willing to do? Am I willing to go steal a little something from the Home Depot and return it to another Home Depot and go buy a jug of wine or a Big Mac? And, what am I willing to do? Those are your ambitions. Well, if those first two columns are off, if I ain't got no money, I got low self-esteem, probably ain't getting laid very much, so it's going to affect my sexual instinct. You follow? Whether unacceptable as your sex life is accepted by either society's, God's, or my own principles. Hidden is elements of my sex life which are contrary to society's, God's, or my own principles. You know those things you said you would never do? I'll never do that. Well, if I'm not getting what I need in that arena, what am I willing to do to make that happen? There's your ambitions. Y'all understand? Yes?
Oh, yes.
Good. Just grunt. Just grunt. Huh?
What about if you're addicted to
Drama? Well, that would be that emotional category, wouldn't it? Do you like drama? I'll go pull the damn fire alarm for you. Just saying.
And some of the instructions that I think is very important over there on page 64, it said, first, we searched out the flaws in our makeup. I'm not here so much to search out the flaws in your makeup. So my first entry, Charlie Yow's name was there. Why? Because I've become every despicable thing I hate in a human being. I live with Charlie Yow every day. Now, I got all the masks to put on. I got a trunk load full of them. I'll be anything you want me to be to try to get your approval. Anything. That is, and when they talk about rigorous honesty, they talk about being you. No sham, no scam, no pretense. Just be you. And I couldn't even be me anymore with all the remorse and the regret and the fear and all that stuff. Then it's another. It said on our grudge list, we said opposite each name, our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sexual relation, which had been interfered with? We're not going to go through this example right here, but it's self-explanatory. And Larry Boy eloquently explained that our packet. But here's another very crucial, I think, direction on taking step forward. We went back through our lives. Little Mary Sue calling you a little fat turd on the playground in nursery school is not the reason you're taking this fourth step. I promise you. My sponsor was emphatic. It says, look back, Charlie. What's eating your lunch today? What did you get up with this morning, said your prayers, and all of a sudden you're reliving this before you get to the commode? For no reason. Put it down. Then you can look back at yesterday. You can look back at next week. And you may even get back to Mary Lou if you're fearless and thorough. But the stuff that's eating your lunch today is what you will drink about tomorrow.
My sponsor, let me get back to the microphone. My sponsor back in the day said, Larry, we're going to do a steam pipe. You know what a steam pipe is? And I said, yeah. He said, you know, they got a valve at the end of it, and they got a contraption at the other end that's generating a pressure. And if you don't take and turn that relief valve and let some of that steam off, it's going to explode. And I said, okay. He said, we're going to do a steam pipe 4-step. We're going to get rid of the stuff that Charlie's talking about that's killing me today, that's making me thirsty. Because I have found, the book is going to tell you, this thing needs to continue for our lifetime. I got to get this thing off of me now, the thing that's eating me up. You know, I had a guy show up one time with 237 pages of resentments with 7 people and things on each page. And I looked at him and I said, no, you go the hell home. This kid was 26 years old. If you met this son of a gun coming out of a grocery store, if you just passed him, you made his list. I said, no, we're not doing this. You go home and you make this real. There is no way that you're pissed off with that many people. There ain't no way. I mean, what's killing you today? You know, again, resentments become laughable when they get out of your mind and on paper. What's eating your lunch today? Make this simple. I mean, we read this document last night, what happened. This is not difficult. This is just another step. It's no more difficult than admitting you're powerless. This is just a step in the process. It's not difficult.
Bill Wilson's laying on a hospital gurney on page 13 taking it. So he wasn't all that spiritually fit. You know, he's sitting there naked just about. And Ebby, he's still shaking, and Ebby's having to write the names down for it. Probably Lois was on it. Probably some of those Wall Street dudes was on it. Maybe his dad was on it. Maybe his mom was on it. Maybe his grandfather was on it. Maybe his heroes were on it. I don't know. It was Bill Wilson's 4th step. But whatever he did, he never drank again. So success can come out of this process if we do it. So the only way to do it wrong is don't do it.
You know, I just did a 4th and 5th step with my first black sponsee, and that's another story. But this is a gang guy, inked up, thug. See the crack of his butt. His pants were so low, and his hat turned around sideways. And I couldn't find a sufficient reason not to sponsor this guy. I was actually shamed by an old man out in Dallas, Texas, into doing it. And we were sitting and talking one night, and I said, Reggie, tell me about your spiritual upbringing, your religious beliefs. He said, well, my mama is a Pentecostal preacher in a holiness church. And in my head, I went, oh, God. And I said, Reggie, let me ask you something. And we're sitting in a little prayer room at the church where we have our home group. And I said, Reggie, in this church, do they teach hellfire and brimstone? He said, oh, yes, sir. I said, Reggie, in this church, do they teach forgiveness? He does this, and he goes, yes, sir, they do. I said, Reggie, do you see a conflict here anywhere? And he got that little grin. His teeth are all broke out where the police have just beat him down. He says, I never looked at it. He says, that's deep. I said, yeah. I said, You were raised the way I was raised. If you think it, you might as well have done it, and there ain't no way you're getting out of it. You're going to burn in eternity. He said, yes, sir. I said, but in the next breath, they tell me that I'm forgiven. How can that be? It's a conflict. The point I make is I gave Reggie his 4-step that night after we got up off our knees. We got together the next day, and he shared his 5th step with me, and it was a booger. And he got home, and he got quiet for that hour, and he did 6 and 7, and he called me up, and he said, Larry, he says, I need to get back together with you. He says, there's some stuff that come to me. You see where I'm going with this? He wrote it down to get that stuff off of him that was blocking him that day. And as he did it, he realized how simple, how easy, and what a vital part of this process it was. And he said, there's some more stuff I got to share with you. And we got back together. This isn't about, and I've described Reggie to you, and he had the most beautiful 4th step I have seen in my 24 and a half years. I mean, it was gorgeous. His handwriting was eloquent. There was nothing sloppy about it. And the boy's sober today, and he's sponsoring people. This was about 60 days ago. He's sponsoring some people. Police ain't after him anymore. He's running the office for the treatment center that he went through. I mean, these are the promises. So we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. Now, we've just finished the resentment. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. I never looked at my part in it.
The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Now, perhaps it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. So our moments of triumph were short-lived.
Sorry, Charlie.
Go ahead.
The next 2 paragraphs that Charlie reads, there's 7 death threats in these 2 paragraphs, and I'll point them out to you as we go through. You'll be able to figure it out as we get to them, but I'll point it out anyway.
It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness.
And this is a real important sentence. To the precise extent that I allow these things in my life, these resentments and these other things, I squander the hours that might have otherwise been worthwhile. I can't go to a meeting tonight because I got a damn resentment at KIP. I need to stay home and work on this resentment. You know, I can't I can't come to Orange County because I'm working on this thing. No, I'm squandering the hours that otherwise might have been worthwhile. I've done it all my life. Fear and resentment just eat my lunch, and it prevents me from enjoying the abundance that Creator has laid out for me.
In other words, all of this stuff that Larry Boyd just read is just a waste of time. Just a flat waste of time. There's nothing productive about it.
It doesn't say to the precise extent that these exist. It says the precise extent that I permit these. I'm the decision maker in this deal. I'm the captain of this train. You get on, by God, when I say you get on. But I got to quit doing that. I've been running the show and it hadn't worked.
But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave.
Death threat.
We found it to be fatal.
Death threat.
For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit.
And here we go. What does it say here now? The first one is infinitely grave. And check this out. It says, it doesn't say that we drink again. It says the insanity returns and we drink again. How about that? It doesn't say we drink and go crazy. We go crazy and then drink. Second one is fatal.
And with us, to drink is to die.
Third death threat.
If we were to live...
And that's the opposite of die, so there's your fourth death threat.
But we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, But for alcoholics, these things are poison.
Death threat.
We turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future.
Key to the future. That's a death threat, because if you want to get in the future, you got to turn back to the book, because there's the key to it. If you stay where you're at, you're going to die.
We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us.
And we allow that. We allow those other people to run our lives and to command how we feel, think, and operate.
And in that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill.
There's your seventh death threat.
Now, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. So this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick.
Perhaps.
Now, though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too.
So we pray.
Ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend.
I mean, we wouldn't walk into the cancer ward down here at this hospital and take inventory of someone that's laying there dying from cancer. They're sick. And when a person offended us, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man, in prayer. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done.
All we're asking is, God, give me peace.
Yeah.
Don't let me relive this anymore. And please help me to stop giving this problem power. None of this will bother us if we don't give it the power. You know, to be a dictator, you have to have 100% cooperation from the dictee. There's no way someone can run my life unless I allow you to. If you want power over me, it's got to be over my permission. Because I have a God consciousness now, and I can say, you don't have the power to make me mad. I have the power to give you that right. But if I'm spiritually in a good space, you don't have the power, Hoss. And I can look at you like a sick man. When I first came into this program, there was a guy that I did not want to be on the face of this earth. I wanted him dead, and I had reasons for him to be dead. And I told David, I want him dead. And David said, well, you're going to have to pray for him. And I said, well, I don't know how prayer is going to kill his ass. Because I want him dead. But like Larry, that name on that piece of paper, seeing my part, took all the power out of it. So I prayed for him. Now, he ain't going to eat at my table. And we are not on each other's Christmas card list. But I can sit here in Orange County, California, and tell you people, I don't want the man dead from my hand. I don't even want his dog to get sick anymore. You know, and that's growth. I quit giving him the power. And that's what we're talking about.
We're going to wrap this portion of the resentment up, and then we'll take a break because we're way over. And I apologize, but we were on a roll.
We avoided retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one.
All right. Now they're going to take a big assumption here that we've made a list, because it's going to say that we refer back to it. I hope you've made the list at this point.
So putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes.
This is the fourth column. Sorry, Charlie. And in this fourth column, you're going to see the word inconsiderate here, and it's not on this page. But you will find that and a couple of pages in the sex inventory. So there's five things here. And I love, Charlie, how many character defects did you tell David you had?
I told, when we talked about the defects of character, I said, good Lordy, man, I got 1,000 defects of character. And David said, no, you got about 5. I said, oh, no, David, I got 1,000, man. He said, okay, for the sake of argument, let's say you got 1,000 defects of character. But what if, Charlie boy, we ask God to get rid of these 5 that this book is talking about, and let's see where those other 995 fall. You can make all the sub-columns you want if you think that's helpful.
Yeah.
But why don't we go to the head of the stream? And these are the 5 defects of character that had been eating my lunch for 30 years.
And again, this is why we strongly suggest that you follow the directions of top to bottom, because you're doing each column as you go along. And when you get over here to this one, there's a good possibility, if you're alcoholic, anything like me, you're going to get blocked. And these are check marks, guys. And check this out. When I've given you this time frame of my guys do their 4-step in a day, this is 9 words or less. What's the cause? Because here's what happens. They get in the car and they hand me that 4-step, and I'm sitting there looking at it, and it says here that you're angry at her. And it says that because she always has to be right. What does that mean? And no matter where we're at, what we get into, she always has to be right, and she shames me in front of my peers, my buddies. Oh, okay. Well, what's that effect? You see where I'm going with this? That column 2 is nothing more than a memory jogger. If you get in my car with a damn legal pad with your life story on it, you're going back home. I ain't got time. No. 9 words or less in that second column. Is this making sense, guys? This is for me. This is what we do. If you want to adopt it, cool. If you don't, rock on.
Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person's involvement entirely. Where had we been to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's.
Very key.
Now, when we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight.
Okay, y'all have any questions on this portion of the inventory? Yes, Tyler, you need to go to the microphone, sir.
All right. So I just have a question about column 4, because all the ways that I've always done column 4 are more in-depth than just check marks. But at the same time, I feel like it takes too long to get through that process anyway. So I'm definitely open to the idea of check marks instead. But I'm still wondering where the whole prayer section fits into this. So, I mean, you're talking about handing your guy this packet and saying, we're going to do your 5th step tomorrow. At what point does he break down and go through and pray for all these people so that he can see the stuff in column 4?
It's in this whole process. It's in this whole 4th, 5th. It's in this process. You're actually going to be praying right here where it says, we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Let's just take this guy. Let's use Charlie for a second, because he's thrown himself under the bus. He wants this man dead. And David suggests that he prays for him. Did you hear that? So when Charlie lists him, his gorge rises, and he sees this guy's face and the wrong that he has done, fancied or real. That's when that prayer comes up. Or if when doing the 5th step, and this person, place, or thing comes up, and you express that to the sponsor or whatever, the sponsor or a competent sponsor will say, you're going to need to pray, just like what happened to him.
I can also know without unequivocally that if I'd went across that page with that name, I would have never put another under it. I would still be there. You know.
Charlie
so I
was
made the
talking
list.
What was it the other night? We were eating Hawaiian barbecue, and that guy that got stuck.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get stuck if you choose to. Based on, and again, guys, we're talking about our experience, and we're not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. This ain't nothing new. You can reconcile that sheet out of this book. But if you do it the way that's suggested in that little small print, the chances of you getting stuck are slim, because you're who, what, who or what? No. What's the cause?
And it doesn't take long to do this prayer. You know? God save me from being angry. Get this. I can't give him no more power, Lord. Just save me from it. And I can go on, you know. I can't make myself like that guy. But God can. God can tell me and convey to me he's one of my kids too. And I promise you, Charlie, I'll take care of what he did wrong. You're not judge and jury. You just happen to get caught up in the mix. Now, who's the master around here, Charlie boy? Just who's the master?
I use the term competent sponsor, and I don't know what that means to you. My guy is my guide. Doesn't mean that he's my higher power. It doesn't mean he's always right. We have got an agreement that we can agree to be wrong. We can have a difference of opinion. And when I give my guys this fourth step, I said, if you're making entries on here and you're unsure, leave it blank. Because I consider myself, I know your story. I qualified you to be here. We qualified that during the first step. We will discover the third and fourth column. If you're unsure, leave it blank. And because I've got these cats, they want to be the golden boy, and they'll show up, and the whole damn thing is aced. Really? Really? No. There's some things that you may not have a part in. And I'm going to give you one example. Kip knows this guy. I think you're the only one in here that knows him. Little French kid that I sponsored back in the day. He showed up at my house, and he was a kid. He was like 18 years old, and come over here from France, and he was a white guy, but he wanted to be black. And he thought it really funny. And he had a guy on his list that had broken into his home, raped, and molested his mother in front of him when he was a little boy. And we were covering this, and it was on his resentment list, and there were no check marks in his part. And I thought there was something wrong with that. And I said, buddy, there's nothing here in this fourth column about you. He said, Larry, I watched it happen. I didn't let him in the house. I was a kid. He was like 3 or 4 years old. So there are going to be some instances. They're few and far between where you don't have a part in it, that you can be angry with people. But my point that I started off with is my guys, they want to be liked so much. And if I check off everything, I'm going to get a better score. Well, there ain't no scorecard here. If you don't have a part, you don't have a part. If you got a part, we'll figure it out. We will discover that in the fifth step process. You guys, yes, ma'am, you got to go to the mic. Sorry.
So you're with your sponsor, Larry, and you guys are reading the big book, right? Before you give him these pieces of paper.
Yeah.
So if you're reading the big book, you're going over that prayer. Am I wrong?
Yes.
So then they'll know, hopefully, if you communicate with them, that they need to pray that prayer for those people.
Absolutely.
Everybody that's on their inventory. That's what I do when I do the workshop. And I just ask them. And the thing that you were just talking about just now, I have lots of women that have been harmed as a child. And what I say to them about that, no, they don't have a part. But the only thing that they have done is to hold on to that resentment.
Victim. They play the victim role,
yes.
And they use
and
it.
what happens is they trash their relationships with whomever, their boyfriends, their husbands, or whatever, from that time to this time.
It's
And
it can become a manipulative skill. Thank you,
Exactly.
Charlotte.
And if
'cause
I
you're
can get them to
absolutely
do
right.
that prayer and release that, because spiritually sick people do spiritually sick things. And that's what happened. But if I'm holding on to it and harming my relationship with the gentleman that I'm with now, I'm hurting myself and continuing that hurt to be continued to be on forever. Thanks.
Thank you. Guys, we're really on the bubble for time, and we're probably going to have to go a little long tonight. Let's come back at 1:15, please.